Welcome to this evening's Timberview Helicopter Operating Agreement
Recording
public meeting.
in progress.
What's that? Oh, thank you. So again, welcome to Timberview Helicopter Operating Agreement public meeting for you all. The purpose of this public meeting, I knew it, Carol. Please advance the slide. The purpose of the public meeting is to present the draft operating agreement with Timberview Helicopters and provide the legal, technical, and operational context for the agreement. You'll hear from a number of folks this evening that was available on the agenda. Mr. Eric Pilsk, our county airports attorney, will explain the legal framework, specifically whom has jurisdiction, which is very important. Mr. Richard Russell, retired FAA specializing in helicopters, who also serves on the Okaloosa County Aviation Board, will cover related federal aviation regulations. Mr. James Stubblefield, the tower manager at the Destin Executive Airport, will brief air traffic control service duties and procedures. Mr. Michael Schofield, Timberview Helicopters attorney, will brief airspace. And Mr. Justin Johnson, owner of Timberview Helicopters, will discuss his tour routes and procedures, followed by, it looks like we got a good break in the weather, followed by a helicopter demonstration in the parking lot. So that's where, when we get to that point, we're going to ask everybody to please quickly and efficiently and safely vacate the facility, go out in the parking lot where Mr. Johnson will demonstrate the new proposed altitude that he's going to operate his tours at 500 foot. So the public can have a good visual and an audio of what that looks like within the new operating agreement. So thank you, Justin, for doing that. And then we'll funnel back in the room and grab our seats, and we'll have Mr. Eric Pilsk, our county airports attorney, will provide a good overview of the draft Timberview operating agreement. And then following that, we'll go into the public comment period. Again, very important, a 3-minute per person speaking limit will absolutely be in place. We've received a number of speaker cards. When your name is called, please make your way up to this podium. Ensure the microphone is on. You'll see the red light, and then turned off when you're completed with your comments. During the comment period, please respect the time limit so everyone that wishes to speak gets their chance to speak. This meeting has been publicly noticed, offered on Zoom, live streaming, and is being recorded. So again, I think we have how many members on, or Zoom participants?
We have 18.
Okay, 18 participants on Zoom. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Eric Pilsk, again, our county airports attorney, to go into his presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, Tracy. As Tracy said, my name is Eric Pilsk with the law firm of Kaplan, Kirsch, and Rockwell. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and we serve as a special airport counsel, outside airport counsel to the county. I'm going to spend a few minutes and try not to make this too law school lecture-y, but I think it's important to understand the legal context in which this operating agreement is being negotiated and considered by the county commission, because the respective authority of the county as owner of Destin Executive Airport and that of the FAA and the air traffic control tower, everyone has distinct responsibilities, and it's important to understand what the county can do and almost and equally importantly what the county cannot do with respect to the issues that we're all facing with respect to the helicopter air tours and other users of the airspace. So let me start with sort of a very brief overview of the scope of authority. The FAA has exclusive authority over aviation safety, the flight of aircraft, aircraft noise, and airspace management. Other entities, with a few exceptions which I'll get into, have virtually no authority in those areas. So with respect to aviation safety in the air, that's exclusively the responsibility of the FAA. With respect to where aircraft can and cannot fly, that is all subject to FAA rules and regulations, something that the county or the city of Destin, for that matter, no local jurisdiction has any real control over. Aircraft noise at the source, that is in the aircraft itself, is exclusively in the jurisdiction of the FAA. And as we'll talk about, there's limited authority on the part of an airport sponsor, such as the county, to control access to the airport. But beyond that, no authority by the county and no authority on the part of other jurisdictions, for example, the city of Destin. So that's the very general framework. And now let me drill into some of the specifics of each of those categories. If we can advance this. Oh, it does work. So safety. As I said, the FAA has exclusive jurisdiction over aviation safety, particularly safety in flight of both the equipment and the manner in which aircraft operate. This is generally enforced through the Flight Standards District Office, or FSDO, you might hear references to, which reports up through the flight standards line of business for the FAA. The district office is sort of the line level place where most of the inspectors and initial enforcement work is done. The county, even though a sponsor of the airport, has no authority to address safety of the aircraft in flight. The county does have limited authority to address safety on the airport as it would affect the safe operation of the airport. But even that is subject to review and oversight by the FAA. As the FAA itself says, the FAA is the final arbiter of safety. So any safety-related decision by the county is subject to oversight and reversal or confirmation on the part by the FAA. And again, that only relates to safety on the airport itself. It does not relate to the equipment itself unless that equipment isn't being used in a way that somehow impairs the safety and operation of other airport users. Flight procedures, flight paths, flight altitudes is within the exclusive jurisdiction of the FAA. As we'll hear in detail later, the Federal Aviation Regulations, or FARs, spell out how aircraft, to some degree, how aircraft can operate, and the rules and regulations around that, as well as FAA guidance documents. But again, that's all in control of the FAA and not the county or other local jurisdictions. State and local governments cannot ban, limit, or regulate overflights. Again, that's in the exclusive jurisdiction of the FAA. Now, the county as airport owner does have greater privileges and greater authority than, say, the city of Destin, which is not the airport owner. It is, however, subject to important restrictions. So, first of all, there is limited authority to adopt what we call access restrictions. These would be curfews, limits on particular noisy aircraft, or operations cap. But that is subject to a number of very limiting laws and regulations that really restrict the ability of an airport owner to adopt those kind of measures. First, and I'll get into each of these in a little bit of detail, but there's the grant assurances, which are a set of promises that airport sponsors like the county make to the FAA in exchange for receiving grants. And violation of that can result in loss of grant funding, as well as enforcement by the FAA in the form of injunctions and other remedies. The Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990, sometimes called the Noise Act, sometimes called ANCA, imposes another set of restrictions, procedural requirements on the ability of an airport sponsor to adopt these kinds of access restrictions. Independent of the grant assurances, a separate requirement, and the FAA makes it very difficult to adopt restrictions under that law. Only one restriction has been adopted at one airport since the law was enacted in 1990, and it's very difficult to do that. Other principles of law, federal preemption, and general constitutional limits also apply to restrict the ability of an airport owner to restrict operations. So with respect to the grant agreements, Grant Assurance 22 is the primary regulation here, and it essentially requires an airport operator to allow access for aeronautical use to the public on reasonable and not unjustly discriminatory terms. The FAA has adopted a sort of elaborate series of requirements of how it will evaluate restrictions based on noise. Again, it makes it very difficult. It requires a great deal of study and analysis by the local jurisdiction to define the noise problem, to define solutions, to assure that there are no non-restrictive measures to do it. The one example of an airport that successfully adopted a restriction was the city of Naples over on the Gulf Coast, south of here, obviously. And it took years and, I don't know, $1 million or more of work to get that restriction finally adopted over FAA objection and years of litigation with the FAA. The FAA takes aggressive enforcement action against noise restrictions and alternatives and measures to ensure that and requires careful examination of alternatives. I think the most important thing for today to keep this in mind is that an operating agreement is not the way or the place to adopt those kind of restrictions. It requires study and analysis, and it must be applied to all users equally. So if there's a noise problem, you want to solve the noise problem, and you're not intended to be adopted with respect to a single operator in a single operating agreement. An airport may impose restrictions for safety on the airport, as I said. Again, it's subject to the FAA approval. The FAA is the final arbiter of what is or is not safe use of an airport or an aircraft. And as I said, the failure to follow these rules can result in loss of federal grant funds at all county airports, as well as potential injunctive and other enforcement action by the FAA, excuse me. I mentioned the Airport Noise and Capacity Act. It's a separate requirement that would have to comply with in addition to the grant assurances. It would require an onerous study to restrict what are called the Stage 2 aircraft, which refers to aircraft of a certain class with certain similar noise characteristics. And both the R44 and R66 helos here are rated as Stage 2 aircraft. To restrict more modern aircraft, or with different engines, I should say, engine types, Stage 3 aircraft or higher, requires both an onerous study and is expressly subject to FAA approval. As I said, the FAA disfavors these restrictions. Only one has been approved since 1990. Other applications were rejected by the FAA or withdrawn in the face of FAA opposition. And I just underscore this to say that it's a major undertaking to even consider pursuing this with a very uncertain outcome. And again, it follows the study and FAA review. It's not something that can be implemented through an operating agreement with respect to a single operator. And just a short note, because I know questions have been asked about this with respect to the helipad out on Highway 98. That was approved by the county, by FDOT, and the FAA back in, I believe, 2012. And I think as has been explained in other meetings, it's considered a non-conforming use under the county code, but it's permitted as long as it remains in use. The county, at least as the airports, has no particular authority over operations off the pad, and the pad is not part of and really cannot be part of this operating agreement. And that is a brief overview of the legal context. I will come back, as Tracy said, and walk through the highlights of the new operating agreement, and of course, we'll listen to comments at the end. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dick Russell with the Okaloosa County Aviation Board. And what I'm going to briefly go over is federal aviation regulations, and these are very minimal. If you're interested, this is available from public use. You can buy it from one of the Sporty's aviation shop, or just Google it online. These federal regulations are codified of the rules established in the Federal Register by the executive departments and agencies of the federal government. The FAA falls under CFR Title 14, Aeronautics and Space. There are 6 chapters in this that relate specifically to the FAA and Department of Transportation, subchapters A and N, parts 1 to 199. Subchapter F has to do with air traffic and general operating rules. Part 91 is general operating flight rules, which has to do with the pilots that fly the airplanes. Subchapter G is for air carriers and operators for compensation or hire. This helicopter operator would fall under that because he's open for hire. Part 135 is not applicable to temp review operations, but they are subject to Part 136, commercial air tours. There's also advisory circulars. They're documents produced by the FAA to inform and guide institutions, individuals in the aviation industry, and the general public. They're non-regulatory, but describe best practices for operations or clarification of a new regulation. Next slide. This is basically the letter of authorization, commercial air tour operations, authorization, and anti-drug and alcohol misuse prevention program registration. And it identifies here the operator, Timberview Helicopters, is documented at the end of this letter of authorization, is authorized to conduct commercial air tour operations under Title 14 CFR, Section 91-147, in accordance with the limitations and provisions of this LOA, and is subject to the condition that all operations are conducted with the applicable airspace. Thanks. National Air Safety Air Tour Standards. Commercial air tour definition means a flight conducted for compensation or hire in an airplane or a helicopter, or the purpose of the flight is sightseeing. It must provide suitable landing area for helicopters. It's an area that provides the operator a reasonable capability to land without damage to equipment or injury to persons. Now there's some site-specific things here designated and FAA acceptable. If you're flying over water, then 136.9 says you got to have life preservers for all occupants. 136.11 has to do with helicopter floats, and 136.13 is a helicopter performance plan, which is the daily responsibility of the pilot, and consistent with the rotorcraft flight manual. And the pilot in command is supposed to exercise a reasonable plan to avoid a height velocity curve, which is a little more complicated. It's outlined in the manufacturer's rotorcraft flight manual. Next slide. Aeronautical Information Manual, Chapter 4, ATC, which is Air Traffic Control. I can't see the first letter there. 3-17 is VFR helicopter operations at controlled airports, which Destin is. And in general, it says the following ATC procedures and phraseologies recognize the unique capabilities of helicopters and were developed to improve service to all users. Helicopter design characteristics and user needs often require operations from movement areas and non-movement areas within the airport boundary. In order for air traffic to properly apply these procedures, it is essential that the pilots familiarize themselves with the local operations and make it known to controllers when additional instructions are necessary. Paragraph 2, insofar as possible, helicopter operations will be instructed to avoid the flow of fixed-wing aircraft to minimize overall delays. However, there may be situations where faster, larger helicopters may be integrated with fixed-wing aircraft for the benefit of all hazardous effects of rotorcraft downwash in congested areas. Number 3, because helicopter pilots are intimately familiar with the effects of rotor downwash, they are best qualified to determine if a given operation can be conducted safely. Accordingly, the pilot has the final authority with respect to the specific airspeed, altitude combinations. ATC clearancers are in no way intended to place a helicopter in a hazardous position. It is expected that pilots will advise ATC if a specific clearance will cause undue hazards to persons or property. Minimum safe altitudes, FAR 91-119. In general, it says, except when necessary for takeoff and landing, no person may operate an aircraft below the following altitudes. So paragraph A, it says anywhere. An altitude allowing, if a power unit fails, an emergency landing without undue hazard to persons or property on the surface. Paragraph B says over congested areas, which Destin's been identified as a congested area. Over any congested area of a city, town, or settlement, or over any open air assembly of persons, an altitude of 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a horizontal radius of 2,000 feet of the aircraft. Paragraph C, it says over other than congested areas, an altitude of 500 feet above the surface. except over open water or sparsely populated areas. In those cases, the aircraft may not be operated closer than 500 feet to persons, vessels, vehicles, or structure. Now, paragraph D speaks specifically to helicopters, powered parachutes, and weight shift control aircraft. It says if the operation is conducted without hazard to persons or property on the surface, a helicopter may be operated at less than the minimum prescribed in paragraph B or C of this section, provided each person operating the helicopter complies with routes or altitudes specifically prescribed for helicopters by the FAA. And I can't see, it's the last one, powered parachute. Yeah, it really doesn't apply to this operation. Yeah, weight shift.
A powered parachute or weight shift control aircraft may be operated at less than the minimums prescribed in paragraph C of this section.
Thank you. Next slide. Other considerations. FAR 9113 is careless or reckless operation. No person may operate an aircraft, includes helicopters, in a careless or reckless manner so as to endanger the life or property of another. Then it goes down here, Advisory Circular 9136D, visual flight rules near flight near noise-sensitive areas, which Destin is. Excessive aircraft noise can result in annoyance, inconvenience, or interference with the uses and enjoyment of property and can adversely affect wildlife. It is particularly undesirable in areas where it interferes with normal activities associated with the area's use, including residential, educational, health, and religious structures and sites and parks. Recreational areas, including areas with wilderness characteristics, which we have one nearby, wildlife refuge, and control and historical sites where a quiet setting is a generally recognized feature or attribute. Potential noise impacts to noise-sensitive areas from low-altitude aircraft flights can also be addressed through application of voluntary practices set forth in this advisory circular. Adherence to these practices is a practical invitation, a pilot concern for the environment, which will build support for aviation and alleviate the need for any additional statutory or regulatory actions. Is that it? Oh, voluntary practices. Paragraph 8, to paragraph A, avoidance of noise-sensitive areas, if practical, is preferable to overflight at relatively low altitudes, which helicopters do. Paragraph B, pilots operating noise-producing aircraft, fixed wing, rotary wing, and hot air balloons over noise-sensitive areas should make every effort to fly not less than 2,000 feet above ground level, weather permitting. For the purposes of this AC, the ground level of noise-sensitive areas is defined to include the highest terrain within 2,000 feet above ground level, laterally of the route of flight, or the uppermost rim of a canyon, and complaints of noise disturbances caused by the flying aircraft over noise-sensitive areas. That's a legal thing, obviously. I didn't write that. Paragraph C, departure from or arrival to an airport, climb after takeoff, and descent for landing should be made so as to avoid prolonged flight at low altitudes near noise-sensitive areas. Paragraph D, it says this advisory circular does not apply where it would conflict with several federal aviation regulations, air traffic control clearances or instructions, or where an altitude of less than 2,000 feet AGL is considered necessary by a pilot to operate safely. You want me to go over this? Tracy? Pardon? Okay, thanks.
Good evening. My name is Mike Stubblefield. I'm the air traffic manager at Destin Control Tower, and I'm trying to give you a little bit of an overview of what our tower does. I want to give you a summary of the air traffic control tower operations and the regulations that we have to go by from the Destin Control Tower, or from the FAA. Air traffic control operations rules and procedures, separation requirements, and controlling actions are contained in what we call our Bible, 7110.65 Zulu currently. Its current revision date was May 5th, 2021. And when I first came in, the first book we looked at was Delta. So this changed a lot. The order is composed of 633 pages that we have to be familiar with and pass monthly, quarterly, and annual training testing of these policy and procedures of these orders. The purpose of this order is to provide safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of traffic. That's what we look to do. Primary purpose of the ATC system is to prevent a collision involving aircraft operating in the system. Provide the safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of traffic, and we support the national security and homeland defense missions. The ATC system provides a certain additional services to the extent possible or permitted. Provision of these services is not optional, but rather required when the work situation permits. Various factors that limit or are included to this is the volume of traffic, the frequency congestion, which is the radio frequency we talk on, the quality of the service that we're giving, controller workload, higher priority duties such as an emergency, and the physical inability to scan and detect situations that fall into the category. First priority to separating aircraft and issuing safety alerts is required in this order. That's our first job. Good judgment is used in prioritizing all other provisions of the order based on the requirement of the situation at hand. Because there's so many variables, you can't put a list down as this is first, this is second, this is third. It's all based on the situation. So we have to be flexible. Next. We provide support to the national security and homeland defense activities. That could be military, FAA, Border Patrol, Customs, all of it. Not limited to reporting of suspicious and unusual aircraft pilot activities. We provide and solicit weather information in accordance with the procedures and the requirements outlined in the order, and we provide additional services to the extent possible. Contingent only upon the higher priority duties and the factors including no radar, the volume of traffic, the frequency, and the workload. Two things that we do, priority handling is the fact or condition being regarded as treated as important. It's the right to take precedence or to proceed before others. This would be emergencies, presidential aircraft, or medevacs. Expedite is the action that we give them to proceed without delay and to be accomplished quickly. An aircraft in distress has the right of way over all aircraft. We treat air ambulance flights with priority, especially when the pilot identifies himself as the medevac, lifeguard, as such. And we provide priority handling and expeditious handling of the presidential aircraft and his entourage and any rescue support aircraft such as Coast Guard. The Destin Control Tower has two primary positions, the ground control and the local control position. Local control is referred to as tower, and it's a team comprised of two individuals working each position separately. Both ground control and local control are constantly monitoring and communicating on assigned frequencies, in addition to coordinating operations that involve other people's or other positions' area of responsibility. This is when we cross vehicles over the runways, landing the helicopters on taxiways, or vehicles running around the airport cutting the grass. Most complex position due to the nature is the operation is volume and responsibilities. This is local control. This is the one that is busiest in the tower. They coordinate all departures and releases with excellent approach control. They clear aircraft for takeoff and landing, separate the aircraft departing and arriving to the airport. We maintain surveillance of the runway for departures and arrival into airspace. We issue traffic information to all aircraft within the Delta that we know of. We operate communications equipment to include radios, light guns, and phone lines. A light gun is used to communicate with an aircraft that's radio is out. So that's all he can see is the light. We coordinate with ground control for airport movement areas and operations. Next. Ground control is the least complex position. That's why they combine up with three things that they do. They issue clearances to all the departing aircraft. They coordinate non-standard procedures and issue pertinent information to Eglin Approach Control. They monitor, record, and augment the weather. They control and instruct all aircraft, vehicles, and personnel on the controlled movement area, such as our taxiway. They coordinate the fire department response and law enforcement when needed, and they monitor and complete various documentation on the computer that we have to do for our logs, traffic count, such. Additional specialist tasks that we do. We report pertinent or urgent information to me, is what they will do at the tower. They visually scan the active runway and control movement areas. They're receiving and issuing information with Jacksonville Center and the flight service stations, coordinating for aircraft towing, parking, construction, other information with the FBO, requesting or canceling the NOTAMs, and we deal with the Airport Operations Center, which is the phone line that we call our stuff into. Monitor the emergency aviation frequencies and the local fire department and law enforcement radio frequencies. When we have an accident or an incident on the airport, we have their radios up. Destin airspace is defined as Class Delta when we're open from 6 a.m. in the morning and 2200 at night, 10 o'clock. And the airspace was then returned back to Eglin airspace. So Eglin takes control at that point. When we're closed, all the aircraft are required to make radio contact with Eglin before they take off. It's Part 93 airspace. They have to have radio communication before they go anywhere. Next one. This is a picture of our airspace. The little red pie looks like a piece of pie. The Air Force gave us a piece of pie. Next one. That's what Eglin's airspace is. It's a lot of airspace. Destin ATC operations have several factors that limit our ability to perform. Lack of a certified radar display in the tower. We've had a few phone calls from residents, but this is what we have to do. The increased workload for tower controllers at verifying the aircraft's position, speed, and altitude. It's time consuming, it's increased difficulty, depending on the weather conditions such as haze. The number of transmissions between the pilot and controller just to figure out where they are. They give inaccurate or erroneous position reports, so we can't give accurate traffic calls on that position because the pilot told us he was east when he's really west. The accuracy of the position reports can vary plus or minus 3 minutes. An aircraft doing 180 knots travels about 3 miles a minute, so it's hard to keep up. Next. ADSB in the control tower. Why don't we have it? Well, currently ADSB has not been authorized by the FAA for use in control towers. It's coming, it's the way of the future. The STARS and the G4 Elite are the only systems that are authorized to be in the tower right now. Thank you. I'll be around.
Let me hit the on button there, so I'm also being recorded. My name's Mike Schofield. I do represent Timberview in this case. I'm one of only 48 board-certified aviation attorneys in the state of Florida. As far as I know, there are no other states that board-certify aviation attorneys, which means it is what I do. I've been doing it for 40 years. I'm also a pilot, an instructor, a multi-engine instructor, an instrument instructor, an advanced ground instructor, and an advanced instrument ground instructor. I've got every rating except for ATP. Airline transport. I'm too old to fly for the airlines, or I would have it. They would retire me in about a year. So I'm going to go through quickly some slides, and I'll see if this will work for me. There we go. And I know this is hard to see. It's really not intended for you to read it, and I'm not going to read from it and bore you that way. Those colored things you see, the red, the yellow stacked upside down wedding cake, the green one, I think it is, if I'm not getting colorblind as I get older. And then the Class D on the far side, that is what Destin has. What does that mean? That means it is controlled airspace. You've heard some people read something to you that says, well, the pilot's the final authority. That's true and not true. The pilot is ultimately responsible, meaning if I goof as a pilot, I'm the one that gets called by the FAA and my license gets revoked or I get fined or all kinds of nasty things happen. And I do have the ultimate ability to say to even a tower, unable. That's the famous phrase. If the tower tells me, turn left 10 degrees and descend and restrict your speed to X, depending on my aircraft, I might be able to say unable. Then it goes back to the tower to look around, shift around, and say, all right, can you accept turn right 10 degrees and descend at 150 knots or whatever? And I can say, understood, it's called a read back. I'll read back that instruction, and then we're on the same page. That's how we work with towers when they're in service. Like when I fly into Destin, before I get into Destin's airspace, I have to be in contact with Eglin. Then they usually hand me to Hurlburt, because I'm coming from Pensacola most often. And then Hurlburt hands me to the Destin Tower at some point. And I cannot enter his control space until I contact him, legally. Now, can I? Yes. I'm flying an airplane. I can do any darn thing I want to. But when I get on the ground, I'm going to get a note that says, call this number. That means I'm in trouble. That means the FSDO is going to send down an investigator. They're going to look into it. They're going to pull the tower tapes, and I'm going to get a certificate action probably. No pilot wants that. It's expensive. It's a long path to get your ratings. It's not what they want to have happen. That Class D airspace, that's Destin. See if I can get this to work again. There we go. This shows it on a second page, and what this is actually up there for is just to confirm for you what I'm telling you. This is from a book called the PHAK for short, Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. It's an FAA publication. It's their book. It's the book we use to teach pilots, along with a lot of other materials. Class D airspace, generally that airspace from the surface to 2,500 feet, surface to 2,500. That includes the area around the airport. Arrival extensions can be granted unless otherwise authorized. Each aircraft must, mandatory word, establish two-way communications with the facility providing air services. That would be Destin Tower. In fact, as I'm coming in, I'm going to call Destin Tower. Destin Tower is going to say 55 Sierra, maintain current heading, 2,000 feet, prepare to enter a right base for runway 14, which will be landing to the south coming from the west. So I'm kind of looking ahead. I see the runways over there. I'm angling to get on a right base. He may even give me a specific heading. Take a heading of 090 degrees. I either fly that or I get that infamous call a number upon landing, which I don't want to get. Or I can say unable if I'm unable. But those are really my options. Same applies to the helicopters. Class D is mandatory. Again, we're looking at the same kind of thing here where it talks about coordinating the use of airspace. Before I leave Destin, I have to talk to the tower. The tower coordinates with Eglin because Eglin owns everything, including Destin and on top of it. And then Eglin will say the clearance to them, and before he says I'm cleared to take off, he'll tell me runway heading, let's say I'm departing to the south, runway heading, climb to 800 feet, 1,000 feet, it's not uncommon, a low altitude. Upon your turn back to the west, contact Eglin on 132.1, and I'll read it back. I then contact Eglin as soon as I turn. I do not climb or go below unless he's given me a 1,000 feet or below. That means I can go below until I've contacted Eglin. And Eglin may then tell me, we want you to maintain that 1,000 foot. We have traffic in or out. Because as you all know, being residents, and I'm a resident, we have a lot of jet traffic, a ton of military traffic. We have the Ospreys now. We have Helos, C-130s. You do not want to hit a C-130 in your Cessna 172 or in your Robinson helicopter. It would be a very bad ending to the day. So I have to talk to them. Again, Class D, no pilot may take off or land at an aircraft at a satellite airport within a Class D or at the main airport until you establish this communication. Unless otherwise authorized. No person may operate an aircraft to, from, through, or on an airport with an operational control tower unless they have that communication. This is straight out of their books. We are in complicated airspace, but it's still open to the public because it's public tax dollars that pays for all of this. So I still have a right to fly down here and fly into Eglin. By exercising my right as a pilot, I agree to follow the instructions I'm given. I must be in radio contact. If I'm assigned an altitude and a heading, I need to fly it. It is a dual responsibility. I cannot simply fly anywhere I want to at any, quote, safe altitude, even though there are regs that say that. Someone wrote to the FAA, got a letter back saying helicopters can fly anywhere they want. And I told him in a discussion, I said, that's partly true, but it depends on the airspace, the location, a lot of other factors. Yes, in general, they can, but often it's not really the case. They would be in a lot of trouble. Whether it's Timberview or Joe Pilot in his personal helicopter, out of Destin, he's going to follow the instructions that he's given. That's simply how it works. In Class D with the tower open again, must be in contact. They tell us how and where. If you don't comply, potential violation, what we've just talked about. There we go. This is a slide that just shows you what you've all seen. The Destin Airport and the overlay. It's a busy area. This is an overlay I wanted to show you of the Eglin transition zones. The kind of pinkish, reddish, and then the yellow sidelines, and you can see where our little pie is cut out down here at Destin. Eglin has all kinds of traffic transiting those areas. Some are on an instrument practice approach, meaning the pilot's not looking, he's following gauges, even if it's beautiful weather. We do that too as civilians. So all of this has to be coordinated, and the tower does a wonderful job of doing that. And ATC generally does a wonderful job of helping us, even when it's see and avoid for us, to see and avoid each other and to avoid all the military that's out there, because there's a lot of it. You saw this slide earlier. I had the same one in mind, and now I want to go to the last one. These are the proposed routes that Timberview wants to fly. You can see the black lines up there and then the straight out. Doing the best we can to avoid directly overflying homes. Now, I know you're laughing. Listen, it's my turn. You're going to get your 3 minutes each, and you're welcome to it. But what you got to understand is, if you don't have an agreement with them, the helicopters can then fly anywhere they want to, so long as ATC clears them. They can fly over your house, and guess what? I understand this is about noise. We don't want to do that. We're trying to work this out and make this something that we adhere to under an agreement with the county. And we're willing to do that. We're willing to tell our pilots, this is the route you will fly, or we'll terminate you. These are the routes we want to put into effect. We also have minimum altitudes. We're trying our best to make sure that depending on how we're loaded, climb out will be within the perimeter of the airport to an altitude of 500 feet. We've all worked on that together. The county's been doing a wonderful job of trying to negotiate with us. We're trying to shoot for 600. Keep in mind, though, we have restrictions because tower may have fixed wing traffic at 1,000 and 1,200 coming in and out. And we can't go above that because then we're bumping into Eglin, because Eglin has all of their traffic at 2 crossing. Now, I've always kind of wondered, an F-35 at 2,000 feet coming in over the beach, if he loses his engine, he ain't gliding to Eglin. But, you know, that's what they tell us. When they tell me to maintain 1,000, it's usually because they got jets above me and below me. So, just so that you guys understand, and I know you do already, the county's in a tough spot, as are the residents. The FAA is who has control over this. You heard a retired FAA person, greatly appreciate his coming, but the FAA itself has not come because they also understand with the complications of the airspace and with the problems that are faced, we have got to work together to reach an agreement, because you cannot simply pass a rule that says no helicopters and no helicopter tour operators. That, to go back to the initial questions that were raised and the initial comments by Eric, would potentially violate grant assurances, federal statutes, and put the county in a precarious position. We're residents here. We don't want to see that either. I don't want to see bad things happening to the Destin Airport because I love to fly down here with students. So I hope you will give us a little bit of grace. I understand there's a lot of you that would just love for this to go away. But we're here to try to work with you, try to establish better routes, better altitudes, and try to help. Thank you all. All right, so the question was the routes. You know what, Justin, I think you could probably delineate those with landmarks even better. Can you get it bigger? There we go. So let's see if I can get this. There's the runway. Okay, let me go back to the routes for you. There's the routes. So the runway, if I can get the laser pointer coming again, is that little thing right there? Correct. That's the wooded area, and trying to hug the airport and the wooded area, and then depart straight out and return. And then going to the north, over the bay, and then down along the bridge corridor. Okay? Which one? This one? That's just off the end of the runway. Okay. Let me say this also. Yeah, Justin's going to give us a briefing. If you wait a couple more minutes on the routes, that's his specialty. He's been working on it very hard together with the county. And the county's been looking at these routes with us also. Yeah. I'll leave my slide up, and if somebody wants to come back to it, they can come back to it. And then we'll try to get you a better answer on the routes.
So that's what I use? Okay. All right. I'll do the routes here. And this slide is the routes, but it's really hard, as you can tell, to see your home or landmarks with the grayscale that we're using. So if we could go back to the slide that has the satellite imagery just for 1 second. Oh, I can do it?
Hit the back button right there.
Okay. I think this will probably be easier for people. Is this got the laser on this button?
Very front, red one. Red button up here. Press
Sorry.
and hold.
Sorry. So I'm pointing to this one. I don't know if this is the easiest one for you guys to see or if I should go to another one. Would you like this one? All right. I'll use a big voice.
You want the mic?
I'm pretty loud.
They want people online to hear it too. So
Oh, okay, sorry. You're gonna use both ends. All right. All right, I fly a helicopter. I think I can do this. All right. So we all, if you don't know, the helicopters are departing off this north ramp area right here. This is the north section of the airport, which is called the Lynx FBO. And most of days, as you know, the winds are out of the south. So all aircraft flow and traffic typically takes off into the wind. So you're going to have aircraft from airplanes taking off on the runway to the helicopters taking off on what's called Alpha taxiway that parallels the runway or the runway. They're all going to take off in the same direction on the days where the wind's out of the south. It's just aerodynamics, it's just how aircraft work. So, and that's about 80% of our summer, maybe 90%. The winter time is when you see the northern winds. Once in a while we get a strange wind, but prevailing south winds is what we have in Destin. So being that said, the routes are going to take off. In most cases, they're going to take off just like an airplane. They're going to be right off of the runway here in Alpha. They're going to take off all the way down. And we're going to use the ball fields here, cross over, and get all the way to the beach, and then head on down the beach. That's This is the routes that we're talking about putting into place. May not be what you're witnessing right now. These are the routes that we're putting into place. In the past, you've seen routes go over here like this. And that's where you guys, a lot of the complaints have come from, and that was for expediting and whatnot. Our proposed routes are going to go this way. Now, this is where the tower has the latitude to tell us where they want us to go. There may be times that you may still see an aircraft over there because of collision avoidance or whatever else, but most of the time, this is the route that's going to be taken going to the south. Now, you'll see a route on that other picture where it goes up to the north. That's for a north departure, and we call that across the bay, and that would be in a rare case with really strong winds. They'd come across all the way down to the bridge, be very high at this point, and then come down and cross over and then hit the beach and do the route. And then they would come in down the beach, and all traffic at this time is landing runway 32 this direction, going into the airport this direction. They'll just take, just like an airplane, and follow it on to the airport. So the other thing that you're still gonna have presence of aircraft, and this is called the downwind. And I don't know how else to explain it because I don't know how many people are been in an airplane or understand. And we've tried to explain a lot of things here, and there's a lot to kind of comprehend. But just like when you drive on the roads, there's traffic flow and traffic patterns. So when you go into Main Street off of 98, and you got to turn right on Main Street, you get in the right lane, and that's how you enter into it. You don't get in the left lane, you get in the right lane. Same thing with aviation. In aviation, they call this the downwind. So when the winds are out of the south, everyone's landing from out here, planes are coming in like this, and they're landing on the runway. All the other aircraft coming in from this direction or this direction are going to come across here where you live, and they enter what's called the downwind to come in to land on the runway. There is no other way to route traffic. That's the way airports are designed. Let me finish, and I'll get to you, sir. Well, so we have to follow the flow. There's a flow, and there's a reason for the flow, which is we have to enter the downwind. We cannot fly opposite traffic. That's dangerous. We don't want to hurt anyone. We have to follow the rules and regulations, and the tower clearly has to follow them as well, and so do we. So we basically will enter the downwind, come in and cross over here. This area here that's undeveloped is an area that we have discussed with the tower is what we do is called for delays. So say there's traffic coming to Destin, just like traffic on 98. There's a lot of aircraft inbound. We're using this area here, which is uninhabited right now. It's just a field. It's a marshy, grassy area. There's no one under it, to make circles if there has to be a hold. And that has been the holding pattern design that we have put into place right here. So if someone comes in, instead of flying around your neighborhood or flying back and forth right here, we're going to hold right here in this area, and then the tower will clear us across to land on the north ramp area. That's a typical south area departure, and every day is different. When the temperatures are hot and heavy, when we take off, our goal is to this is the airport, we call this the airport property, the boundary of the airport. Typically, you see this kind of outline right here. Our goal is to be at 600 feet. We may not get to the 600 feet, but we try to get to 600 feet before we exit the airport property. That depends on temperatures. It depends on how heavy our passengers are. It depends on the performance of the aircraft that day. We have invested in larger aircraft that are more powerful, and we've been able to accomplish that this year a lot better than we have in the past as far as climbing out of the airport. So you're going to see aircraft climbing up, and by the time they reach here, we should be around 600 feet. And then by the time we hit the beach, we're still at 600, or we go down the beach at the 600 or 500 feet on down the beach on whatever designated altitudes we're down here. We don't have any desire to be lower now because we have parasails to contend with. We don't have any desire to be higher because we have inbound aircraft at 1,000 feet or 800 feet. There's Ospreys, there's jets, there's all sorts of things at different altitudes. So we have to stay in our lane. I don't know. We've been in Destin for a long time now, and we used to operate from the south ramp area. And the better part about operating from the north ramp is it allows more runway and more area for us to climb in. So it is a benefit. This year has been a very busy season. As you know, Destin has been busier than normal, so we've had higher frequency of flights. We are in the process of changing some of our tours to make them longer so that we have less frequency, because frequency was a complaint. We're also shutting off our shorter frequency flights during certain hours to make it to where we have longer frequencies, because the frequency also makes more work for our company. It takes a lot more work to load up a load like you see on the frequency level. So we are changing our frequencies. And And we're also looking at a larger aircraft next year that will allow us to have less operations as well, because we'll be putting the same quantity in less aircraft. So it would also reduce the amount of number of flights that you see. Now, you had a question, sir? Okay, okay, okay.
Mr. Fields, take back over. Are you taking over, or is Tracy taking over?
Yeah, if we're ready to do the demonstration outside, so let's all please go out in the parking lot. We're going to have a demonstration again of the agreed upon altitude of 500 foot, and as soon as it's done, we're going to come back in here and start the public comment period.
Well, then I'll do the presentation of the.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to do the overview of the operating agreement, then the public comment period. Let's go ahead and get started.
If everyone could take your seats, please, and we can keep this going. We're making good time, and it'd be nice if we can all get folks home for dinner or a late drink, perhaps. All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to take a few minutes and go through the at least in summary, some of the highlights and main points of the new draft operating agreement. And then we'll move into public comment period, and perhaps during the course of that or after, there'll be time for some more discussions. I know several of you have submitted some questions in advance. I'll try to cover them as I go through this, and hopefully we've addressed some of them already today. So let me talk for a minute first about sort of where we are in the process. As you know, on June 15, the County Commission voted to terminate the prior operating agreement with Timberview on 60 days' notice with the instructions to negotiate during that time a new operating agreement and come back to them. They also asked that we come back on July 20 to report on the progress, which we have done. And we are at a point where we have a draft of the operating agreement and sort of sufficient finality to present to the public. And I should say at the July 20 meeting, the Commission also instructed us to have this meeting and to solicit comment and input from the public and the community on the draft operating agreement. I do want to make clear that the agreement is in draft form. Two important things. One, obviously it has not been approved by the County Commission, and the final form is subject to approval by the County Commission, which it will take up at the August 17 meeting. Secondly, and equally important, it is subject to revision based on input that we've received tonight and comments and further discussions with Timberview and within county staff. So we very much want to hear your comments on the agreement as it stands so that we can take that into account to present to the County Commission later this month. So I think that's where we stand. I think someone had asked whether it's a done deal. It is not. It's a draft, and we are looking forward to hearing your input on it tonight. So let me walk through. I know we've posted the draft agreement. I hope and assume that most of you have had a chance, everyone who's wanted to has had a chance to read through it. I won't read it tonight. It's long enough, and we've been here long enough already. Going back to my earlier presentation, the focus of the operating agreement, and as we explained and discussed with the County Commission back in June, the focus of the agreement really is making the agreement work better for the airport in Timberview on the ground and in terms of operations at the airport. And that is both because things needed to be addressed, but also respects the fact that the FAA has control over the flight of the aircraft, the noise issues, the other issues which are of concern to the community. So we need to walk a line between controlling the things that we can control and do the things that we can do to try to address the things that we can't control directly. So,
What is this agreement? Who are they parties agreed? Timberline and
I wish I could turn it
Nope.
up, but yeah.
It's a good question. This is an agreement between Timberview and the county. It is an operating agreement that all commercial operators at the airport need to have either an operating agreement or a direct lease with the county in order to conduct commercial activities at the airport. And this because Timberview does not lease directly property, a hangar or other facilities from the county. We have what's called an operating agreement, which allows the county to contractually enforce rules and regulations and other kind of controls that you'd want for any tenant or occupant of any public property. So that's in essence what the agreement is. There had been an operating agreement that had been in place since 2017, I believe was the date of the last one. And then as we discussed with the County Commission back in June, there were a number of issues with that agreement that we felt would be better addressed through a new agreement, and here we are. The first issue is that this agreement is tied to all of the agreements with Lynx and the hangar lease and better matches what actually the operations that the agreement better matches the operations that Timberview is actually doing at the airport. I forgot to mention there are two other things about the status of the agreement. There are a couple of issues that we are still working through with Timberview, one of which relates to the agreements it has with Lynx, to make sure that its agreements with Lynx match up with what it's doing, and to make sure that the operating agreement with Timberview matches up with what all of those agreements and what it's doing. Secondly, I think that is more in the nature of housekeeping to make sure that everything lines up correctly and they're doing what's authorized to do, but it's important. Second, as we've been discussing, Timberview has agreed to follow the new higher routes or follow future FAA routes and procedures. This is the area where we have, frankly, I think we've pushed Timberview, and Timberview has been very responsive in agreeing to follow this, but we have been engaging with the FAA and the southern region, which is the section of the FAA that has general jurisdiction over the south, to engage the FAA to look at the situation here in Destin, not just the tour helicopters, but the flight traffic in general up and down the beach and the congested nature of the airspace, and do what I think they should do, and adopt routes, modify procedures to reflect the reality of what's going on down here. And we have had some very good conversations with senior staff at the southern region who have told us they have engaged with the various lines of business, that is the air traffic control, the flight standards division, and other sections of the FAA to look at this issue in a comprehensive way and develop, we hope, new procedures that will address the concerns of the community in a more comprehensive and systematic way. Again, the county doesn't have authority to do that, but we've been working very hard to engage the FAA, who does have that authority, to look into this and hopefully prescribe some solutions. In the meantime, we need to rely on the cooperation of the tower, the local tower here, and of Timberview to adopt the best procedures that they can, to address the problems as best they can. And you've heard Timberview and Mr. Schofield describe those routes, and to some extent, Mr. Stubblefield. The procedures and the routes that were presented were worked out, as I understand it, largely informally between the tower and Timberview, and we were presented with them and have incorporated them into the agreement. They do represent a change in the prior procedures, and especially both in terms of the routes and also the altitude, an improvement, I think, in what was going on before, and will be incorporated into the agreement as a term of the agreement. And as I said, this section of the agreement acknowledges that the current FAA review and requires Timberview to comply with whatever the FAA ultimately comes out with. The other provision early in the agreement is a shorter term for the agreement. Before, it was coterminous with the very long-term agreement of the FBO. This is a 5-year term, which is consistent with general county practice on airport leases. It gives the county a chance to revisit the agreement after 5 years to, if you will, right-size the agreement to the nature of operations at that time. Important to understand, unlike a lease for your house or for property, at the end of 5 years, the county is still subject to the obligation to accommodate aeronautical users on fair and equitable terms. So it's not a 5 years and, thank you, I didn't really appreciate your company, see you later. We would have to, at least be willing to accommodate a new agreement with them. But it does give us that opportunity to revisit the agreement and the issues that may exist at that time. We also have significant new or increased new reporting requirements. Quarterly operations report, quarterly quarterly operations report, monthly activity reports, which includes reporting on their activity, which is tied to the fees, a safety plan to address specifically how they're going to move customers through their facility safely, and assure safety on the ramp areas and the other areas around the airport, as well as keeping the FBO facility and the general area, clean and maintained based on their operations. We also have increased access to their flight data upon request. When we receive complaints, we can, in addition to looking at the ADS-B data, which is publicly available, we can request additional flight data from Timberview to get more details of the nature of a particular operation. And we've added increased or additional accident reporting in case of any kind of incident on or near the airfield. We've also revised the termination procedures. Before, there was a 15-day termination. We've modified that to include, on the one hand, a notice of default, period, and an opportunity to cure. However, if it's not cured, it provides for immediate termination by the Board of County Commissioners if it is not cured after that notice. I think those are the primary new terms in the agreement. Does not address, as I mentioned earlier, anything regarding the 98 pad because that's beyond the airport's property and not our, no ability really to have an operating agreement there. And I think, I mean, we'll obviously listen to comments and be available to respond to questions, but those are the primary new terms. Tracy, did I miss anything?
No, you didn't, Eric. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And I think now we'll move to public comment.
Yeah, we're going to move right into public comment. So a number of speaker cards from obviously here and then also some from Zoom. So we'll be switching back and forth between here and on Zoom in no particular order. I do ask that you address from the podium. You'll have 3 minutes. We'll start the timer, right, Carol? So we'll time all the comments, and then following the comments, whomever they're addressed to, we'll answer those or move to the next comment. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start. Does anybody have any questions about the process? Yes, ma'am.
I was curious, y'all outlined a little bit what was different about the new lease. You didn't really say what was in the old lease. So I was curious to know what changed, not just how it changed.
Yeah, quite a bit changed. We could probably give her a link, or, I mean, Eric covered a majority of all the changes,
Yeah,
the major changes.
I think that those issues were the ones that had changed. I didn't explain what was or wasn't there. I mean, some things we added, like most of the reporting requirements. The term changed from the long term that had been to the 5-year term. I mean, honestly, without giving you a red line, I'm not sure if I can walk through everything.
I guess mainly maybe I'm curious about the height, if there were any kind of restrictions previously, and
Before, and I want to keep this brief because I respect everyone's time, but since you asked, before there was a letter agreement with the tower that had been in place up until about 2019 that prescribed certain routes and I believe had altitudes in it. That agreement was terminated in 2019, so there was no particular letter of agreement in effect. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to engage the tower and Timberview to have something defined routes at an acceptable routes and altitudes.
In the original agreement, that's still available on Okaloosa County's website, and we can show you how to get to that after the meeting. But there were no altitudes identified in the original agreement. So in this new agreement, Timberview has voluntarily signed up for minimum altitude of 500 to 600 feet on departure and arrival at the airport's boundary throughout the duration of the tour. So you saw outside the demonstration of what 500 feet looks like and sounds like, and we verified the altitude on the flight view. So let's go ahead and jump into the public comment period, and we'll start with Mrs. Marilyn. And please, if I butcher somebody's name, it's no intention. Mrs. Marilyn McCollum.
Good evening. I'm a county resident, and I'm here only addressing the helipad on 98. And I realize you've made it perfectly clear that this agreement does not relate to that pad, and my question is, why? The pad is located in the county. I know it's not on airport property, but I don't see how that makes any difference whatsoever. If you are so inclined to think so, then my question is, why can't the county have an independent agreement with Timberline or any other helicopter operator as it pertains to the helipad itself, not incorporating the airport at all? My question is too, is the helipad using the airport control tower? Is the tower regulating any of the takeoffs and landings of this helicopter on the helipad? And if it is, then it seems like it should be under some kind of operations agreement that the county has. This is to the FAA. I don't see how you can justify the safe use of a helipad on the busiest highway in the south part of this county. It is outrageous that you think that that's not a dangerous situation just waiting to happen. I hope it doesn't, but I think you're just hoping on false hopes there. On the revised paths that you've indicated up here, do those relate to the helipad operators? Are they following those same flight paths? Or is it a Wild West out there as it pertains to any of the helicopters going off of that helipad? Another question I have is, with this revised agreement, has the county always received 5% gross sales from helicopter tours, or is this new in that agreement? And lastly, can the agreement require that helicopters in the future used by helicopter tour operators have a minimum noise output? I know that there's newer helicopters being made now, and I know that would be a significant investment for these companies, but I think it's a fair trade-off for the community as long as they're operating within it. Thank you.
So we'll just move through responses to respect the comments. So on the Highway 98 pad. Can you hear me now? Okay. As it relates to the Highway 98 pad, yes, like we mentioned, this operating agreement does not include any operations on the Highway 98 pad. That's private property. As far as the control tower questions, I'll ask Mr. Stubblefield to answer those. As far as the 5%, that was on the existing, and that remains the same on the new operating agreement, 5% of gross sales. And then the helicopter specific, I'll turn to Mr. Timberview on that, or Mr. Dick Russell.
Are you talking about the
The type of
changing
helicopter?
types?
Oh, we operate,
Pads.
the what? What's the question from me, Ms. Tracy, that you want to
I think
refer
it
to
was,
me?
the question was specific to a type of helicopter.
Oh, we operate late model R-66 helicopters. Our newest helicopter is about 3 years old, and our oldest right now, R-66, is 7 years old. These are very late model aircraft and very low time. One of them we put into service this year. We only had 150 hours total time on it, which is like a new car. This meeting is to do with all airport traffic, and we're really not, I'm in a position to comment on pad operations at this point.
So let's move on. Well, Mike, you have a comment?
I got a family emergency.
Okay, we have Mr. Slate with RVA, leadership for Mr. Stubblefield, so we'll have him available for comment if we need from the air traffic control tower. Next speaker, Mrs. Sandra Shimrick. Did I get Schrick? Sorry.
Good evening. I don't have prepared comments, but I will share with you a conversation that I had with the FAA, and particularly Pat Bruce and Nina McBride. And I bring this up to your attention because today I got lost in the sauce with all the regulations and handbooks that have been thrown at me. I still am not clear about who has accountability and who has jurisdiction to regulate you. It sounds like there's a lot of flexibility here. Nina McBride, and I quote, told me that the FAA regulates safety, and that's a broad term. And Justin, according to her, you're not violating anything. There are no violations. When I asked her about noise and frequency and traffic pattern, she said that the FAA flatly doesn't regulate that. I think that's where I'm lost. I live in Destiny East, and I watch you guys fly by. I hear you coming, I hear you doing the U-turn, and I watch you going back west. I am still in the flight path of what you proposed. People can't get married on the beach. I have counted in 1 hour 52 flybys. 52 flybys, sometimes within seconds of each other. I can't talk in my lanai to people when I have company over. And it is from 10 a.m. at best to sunset, sometimes after sunset. It is nothing short of relentless. I don't know who has jurisdiction. Nina McBride pretty much said that it's the county who has to install an ordinance in order to regulate this nonsense. You guys landed at Henderson Beach, and even Nina McBride said that that was a safe landing and there was nothing they could do about it. You landed, it was an emergency landing on a beach. I don't understand who's in charge, even with all of the regulations you shared. Thank you.
I'll try briefly to clarify at least one point of the jurisdiction. And it goes back to what I spoke to earlier, that restrictions on the frequency, the noise levels of aircraft using the airport, and so on, while the airport has the authority to propose, the county has authority to propose those kinds of measures, they're ultimately subject to FAA review and approval. And the jurisdiction sort of lies a little bit in the middle. And I'll tell you, and it wasn't Mrs. McBride's section of the FAA that deals with this, it's the airports division. They are openly hostile and adverse to those kind of restrictions. And as I said earlier, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to put them in place. It's not satisfactory. I know that's not a satisfactory answer, but that's the way it is.
Mrs. Teresa Herbert, am I saying that right?
It'll be at the bottom, Tracy. It'll be at the bottom.
Oh, at the bottom, okay. We'll go to Mr. Jim Slate, RVA manager on Zoom.
Jim, you're unmuted.
Thank you very much. I am very appreciative of the opportunity to participate in this meeting. I am the operations manager for RVA. We operate the control tower at the Destin Executive Airport on behalf of the FAA. That's who holds our contract. As you all know, because you live under it, Destin airspace is very complex with the proximity to Eglin Air Force Base. Now, the FAA carved us out a small piece of airspace called the Class Delta. And we do our best to keep the aircraft safely apart in that airspace. We'd love to be a good neighbor, and we have to honor our contract with the FAA to manage the airspace in accordance with the FAA rules and procedures, some of which have been outlined tonight and some have not. We have been in communication with the FAA on this, and we've talked to the airspace office in Atlanta. They tell us that if the tour operator wants helicopter routes, they just need to submit that in writing to us. I know that Mr. Stubblefield has talked to them about what might work from the control tower perspective. And that is our role in the process, is to see how it will blend in with air traffic in the area. After that, the request goes to the FAA, and the FAA reviews it for any required environmental assessment that would be required. We don't have the authority to speak for the FAA tonight. I can only directly relay information that's been given to me. But some of these questions are for the FAA, and we're not going to be able to answer them. But I did want to reinforce a statement that was shown earlier on a slide, and that is that calls from the community about low-flying aircraft are to go to flight standards. The control tower is not the place to call. One, we can't help with it. We cannot see the presentation of the aircraft in the area. And since 9/11, control towers have not been allowed to give specific information on a flight that's in the air at any one time. So unfortunately, we're not able to give you information on flights. But the FAA website says that Flight Standards is the collector for citizens' concerns on low-flying aircraft. And again, I want to thank you for your time. If there is a tower question that I can answer, I'll be glad to. Unfortunately, Mr. Stubblefield has had to go due to a family emergency, but I'll be here during the whole session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I do want to add and I know a lot of questions as far as who has the authority. There's one agency that's not in attendance, either here or on Zoom, and that's the FAA, right? It's frustrating. Trust me, it's frustrating to us. It's frustrating to the county commissioners. It's frustrating to the city council and to the public. They are the agency having authority and jurisdiction of aircraft in flight. We have, just so the public knows, the airports department, in help with the council, has reached out to Senator Scott's office begging for assistance and demanding the FAA take action to come to Destin and develop routes and altitudes that are deemed safe. Like Eric said in his comments in his presentation, to develop routes through a safety risk management analysis, comprehensive analysis of the airspace in and around Destin Executive Airport. So I will tell you, we have spent a tremendous amount of time requesting the FAA's attention. They have acknowledged our requests and our formal letters, and we're told they are working internally. So whatever we end up with tonight, we do hope in the future that the FAA does step in and take control of this situation with some identified routes and tours. So you asked the question, who has the authority, who has jurisdiction? It's the FAA. And unfortunately, they did not show up tonight. I don't know. Let's keep this, trust me, the 5%. So let's keep going. Thank you, Mr. Slate, and I appreciate your availability for any answers specific to the air traffic control tower. So we'll move on. I hope Mrs. Merlin Bartlett. Am I saying that right? I hope. No. Geez, I'm batting 1,000 over here. So, apologize, sir.
This happened all my life. That's why my nickname is Toad, and I go by Toad Bartlett. Thank you. I'm here in support of Timberview Helicopter, and I just want to thank the county and the city of Destin and all of our governmental officials for working on this issue. I live here and I know that there's all sources of noise. There's a lot of noise that emanates from Highway 98, from Crab Island, from the bay. Everything in Destin has changed over time because we depend on tourism and people are attracted to this area. And many of you live here because you first came here on vacation and enjoyed the amenities that existed then. Maybe it was smaller, but as more people come to enjoy this area and as our economy grows, we all have to learn to get together. And I applaud the county officials for working diligently with a provider of recreation services here that many people enjoy. If you've never been in a helicopter to see the artificial reefs that have been installed in the shape of starfish, dolphin, a fighter jet, they're in the water. These are the things that people are enjoying taking the helicopter flights. Noise, it emanates from many sources, and we're all frustrated by traffic delays and everything else in restaurants, lines. But this is our economy. Let's learn to work together. Thank you.
Mrs. Karen Bailey? You're good, ma'am? I have Karen Bailey. Or I have the next card is a Dan Bailey? Okay, so Karen, you're good? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Dan Bailey.
Okay, I'm Dan Bailey, and I live right behind here. A lot of you know me, a lot of friends and acquaintances here. The last gentleman that spoke, he said a lot. Okaloosa County can also use income, and flying in a helicopter is quite a feat. Noise, you want to talk about noise from helicopters? There's some green ones out here at the airport, CH-47s, and they're military. And they fly at night, and they fly over our houses. And so the big ones that shake off your pictures off on your buffet, those probably aren't Timberline helicopters. They're probably military. With that said, the military also knows how to fly quietly, how to let down. Timberline, what is your landing airspeed on your helicopters? How fast are you going?
We approach the airport at about 80 knots.
80 knots. And you approach at an altitude of about 1,000 feet? Lower. About what?
500-600 is the prescription altitude.
500 to 600 feet. Okay, I know a couple years ago for sure, there was people that were breaking those minimums, and they were cutting over Drifting Sand Trail and Broken Arrow, and they weren't at 500 feet. And when you make an approach, do you fly a box? Do you fly downwind, cross, and final approach? Or do you just S it in there?
I kind of outlined it on that graph, but we fly the.
Usually when you make an approach to the airplane, you'll make what they call a box on your approach.
No, we don't make boxes.
So you just kind of do like a Navy guy does and just kind of flop it around?
No, we're cleared what's called direct to our location, so we don't box.
So if you're way over here, the tower clears you in for straight in?
Every time could be different. It all depends on traffic.
Okay, well then maybe the FAA needs to do something on clearing you in.
Let me say though, what we're trying to do is put routes in that will help establish some
I saw
standard.
that. and those are good ones, and a good holding place. Maybe the tower shouldn't be there, though, but you could have done better on the other side of the runway. But anyway, what I'm getting at is, we just saw it right now. When your helicopter descended, you could hear that pop, 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 pop. Okay? An Army pilot could train you guys or give you some information on how to let down slower. And the slower
Sir,
your descent.
two-thirds of our pilots are the same pilots that are flying the green helicopters.
Okay.
They're actually fly dual purpose. They fly weekends for the Army, and a lot of them fly locally here.
So they know how to fly quietly.
They're the same pilots you're talking about, yes. They fly both aircraft.
Okay.
Okay, sir, your 3 minutes is up. Thank
Okay,
you very
they're
much,
not
sir.
flying quietly.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Mrs. Jenny Hopkins, please.
Good evening. Not really sure where to start. I didn't write anything down this time. We've all seen the movies. We've seen some of you may have experienced it firsthand. The brave airmen coming in to save the day. And first you hear the choppers coming, and then you see them, and they're the heroes, and they're arriving, and it's the helicopters they're powerful, and they're tough, and they have cool names, and it's awesome. And we definitely have a need in our society for helicopters, aside from the military, including emergency situations, medevac, fighting forest fires, search and rescue. Sightseeing tours is not an essential business. It's invasive. And this is not just a problem here, it's a nationwide problem. So I urge all of you to please reach out and do your research and use your voice and reach out to the proper entities. And let's put a stop to this type of business in our city. And what I heard was Naples did it. Not how hard they did it, but they did it. And that means Destin can do it too. That's all.
Mr. Bob Shelton.
Tracy, could I have the slide, I think it was the 16th one you showed on the screen? Is that possible? While they're working on that, because I think the clock may be running, there's a lot to say, as we all know. I'm glad we came back inside so we can hear each other and we can think about what we're saying. Any contract or legislation has always unintended consequences. We all understand that, and in any event, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Having experienced both myself in negotiating contracts for airline pilots as a commercial airline pilot myself for 30 years with Delta Airlines, I can appreciate that. You've seen under FAR 91.119 that addresses minimum safe altitudes, 2,000 feet is mentioned, okay? I know there's exclusions, I understand it, I get it. The lifeblood of pilot and aviation is altitude and airspeed to operate safely. No question about that at all. And more importantly, you've seen Advisory Circular 91-360 on the screen. I believe it's up there now. And this is the Good Neighbor Advisory Circular. It's designed just for this occasion, as a matter of fact. It's been in effect a long time. It's tried and true in aviation, and it's successful. Both of these address flight safety and altitudes, which I mentioned earlier, and the resultant fallout to ground safety as well. They are inextricably intertwined. These concepts set forth in these are quite simple and well thought out, and I believe the solution is even simpler. We are, therefore, in an area of finding common ground at this point in our process and alleviating the angst between business and community. Yes, some are voluntary and some are regulatory, but the principles are the same, best practices. So I asked Mr. Johnson if he will commit to operating as a good neighbor within both federal aviation regulations and advisory circulars, the spirit of which would produce safety and provide a 1,000-foot altitude minimum, even though some would indicate a 2,000. Mr. Johnson, it is my belief, personally, that this will greatly relieve the angst of our community and lead us both to be good neighbors and produce a peaceful environment for both parties to flourish. Mr. Johnson, I believe, in closing, your business can flourish and the community can support this concept. So my question to you is simply, will you commit to this concept of safe operations and the minimum 1,000-foot altitude? What say you to your neighbors in our community, sir?
As we described to you, is very complex. 1,000 feet would be like you driving on Highway 10 on the wrong side of the road. There's inbound traffic at 1,000 feet that we cannot avoid and get away from. That's why we were at the altitudes we're prescribed at. It would kill our passengers instantly if we were at 1,000 feet for a day or two. We cannot see the aircraft that are moving that fast at that altitude, and that is why we do not fly that altitude.
Well, being a commercial airline pilot, I question the veracity of that statement. So you will not at this point commit to this concept of safe operations and the minimum 1,000-foot altitude.
Sir, that's an unfair question.
That's what I'm hearing.
There's no such thing as a minimum 1,000 foot. You just said that, and the FAA has made it clear. So please.
We're not talking about the FAA. You know, I understand aviation, sir, very well.
The simple answer is safety's first. Noise is still important, but it's second to safety. Safety will always be paramount. We will not put any passengers in jeopardy over noise complaints.
But if you are at 500 feet, for example.
That's all I can say about it. I'm sorry.
You will not be able to glide to a safe conclusion, and you're jeopardizing not only flight safety, but the lives of the people under you. So I understand you're not going to commit to that. Thank you.
Mr. Jim Boserman on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Stage. My name is Jim Bosserman, a 20-year resident of Crystal Beach. I'd like to make a few comments about the proposed contract that has been discussed this evening. Number one, no community involvement was included in the negotiations as promised at the June 15th Board of County Commissioners meeting, and again reinforced by the Board of County Commissioners on July 20th at the BCCC meeting, even though 2 delegates were appointed. Point number two, the county attorney has not, to our knowledge, done an examination of the proposed contract. And given that it is about 130 pages of current and historical legal documents, it does require that due diligence. For example, as a minor issue, the March 1st, 2017 ramp agreement between Lynx and Timberview, shown in Exhibit 1 of the contract, requires accurate identification of helicopters parking on the ramp. It does not. As a major issue, Exhibit 5 is to be the letter of agreement between the air traffic control and Timberview. It is nothing more than a diagram of flight routes drawn up by air traffic control personnel and Timberview. We are in possession of a letter from Mr. O'Hara, Southern Regional Director of the FAA, to Senator Rick Scott that makes it clear that, quote, ATC quote, air traffic control, excuse me, quote, does not control where or at which altitude these aircraft fly, unquote. In other words, this letter of agreement or diagram is of no consequence nor a legal or binding agreement. And contrary to what Timberview's attorney said, specifically when he spoke at the beginning of the meeting, the county, and I have this on the top level information, the county has not worked on this, but was given this diagram by the air traffic control people and Timberview. Point number 3, the airport advisory board should recommend against approval of this contract, and the Board of County Commissioners should not approve it. More examples of the proposed contract weaknesses and harm to the county and citizens will follow. And I will finish where Mr. Shelton left off, and that is, if there must be a contract, then we ask Mr. Johnson, will he be a good neighbor, abide by the rules, specifically AC 91-36D, Item 8, Part B, voluntary practices, and conduct his tours at 1,000 feet or greater. Thank you.
Also, next on Zoom, Tracy Tapp. Mrs.
Hello,
Tapp.
yeah, can you hear me? I'm Tracy Tapp, I live in Crystal Beach. I live adjacent to the Henderson Beach State Park on its eastern border. And I believe that there is ample evidence that demonstrates that Timberview Helicopters is not a reliable or trustworthy business partner. I'd like to cite the public documents that have led me to this conclusion. On September 6th, 2013, the Destin Log published an article regarding the fact that on August 29th, 2013, the FAA revoked Timberview's letter of authorization. On July 11th, 2019, the Okaloosa County administrator sent a letter to the FAA requesting a review of serious concerns regarding Timberview. A February 11th, 2020, Okaloosa County Inspector General's report documents Timberview's numerous violations of their contract with the county, including questions of potential fraud. At the request of the county, the law firm Kaplan, Kirsch, and Rockwell prepared a letter dated June 8th, 2021, advising the county on how to file a formal complaint with the FAA regarding Timberview operations. On June 15th, 2021, the county airport director sent a 10-page document to the Board of County Commissioners detailing Timberview's contract violations. These violations spanned 6 years. On June 15th, 2021, the County Airports Department voted to ask the County Commission to terminate its contract with Timberview based on the history of violations noted above. On June 16th, 2021, the Okaloosa Airports Director asked that the County Commission terminate its operating agreement with Timberview. Instead, by a 3-2 vote, the Commission decided to renegotiate the contract. So my question is, why would the county continue to do business with Timberview? In closing, as someone who lives in the flight path, I am extremely frustrated that the FAA offers so little relief for residents and the wildlife that are suffering from ceaseless noise. And just on a personal note, my stress levels have increased, my resilience has decreased, my heart rate has increased, my quality of life has been diminished substantially. Finally, my hope is that Timberview will be a good neighbor and comply with FAA Advisory 91-36D related to voluntary practices and fly between 1,000 and 2,000 feet from both the helipad and the airport. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Mike Uyghur.
I'm going to go pretty fast. I had submitted 17 questions about the contract, and we didn't get them answered, so I'm going to go through them and maybe get them answered after my 3 minutes. We got 121 pages yesterday in this contract, and so today we get 3 minutes to go over 121 pages. There's got to be a different way to do this.
The contract was available on Friday, sir.
I know, but no exhibits, so there were no exhibits on Friday. We got them Monday.
Okay.
So, and, you know, just generally, we just need a new way to do this rather than get them the weekend before. The first question is, what is the maximum number of tour helicopters being allowed to fly at one time? The next question, what's the maximum number of helicopters allowed to park at the same time at the airport? Are there going to be any limits as to how many tours are allowed each day? For the FAA or somebody, the contract calls for not sunset, but FAA end of daylight. I couldn't find that anywhere in the FAA regulations, so we need to know what that is. Are there going to be any limits to the allowed flying days? Is Timberview going to be allowed to conduct pilot training from the Destin Airport? And if so, are the students going to be practicing over the Destin houses? Since this is a new operating agreement, will Timberview be required to make application to the airport's director approval under Section 15 of minimal standards? The other question while I'm here is, Mr. Stage, were you involved at all in the routes or the heights? Was the county involved in putting that Exhibit 5 together of where they fly or how high they fly?
No, and to clarify some confusion, the letter of agreement, right? That is essentially the routes that were developed between Mr. Johnson and the air traffic control tower manager, Mr. Stubblefield. As I understand it, and Mr. Johnson can correct me, those were developed by them, and the language that's on those routes or on that map constitutes the letter of agreement, which is Exhibit 5 in the agreement,
Which
in
you
the
had,
operating agreement.
and how much did you have to do with that in the county?
Well, I didn't have anything to do with it.
Nothing.
Nobody in the county or on my staff participated in the development of those routes or language on what we're calling the letter of agreement, Exhibit 5.
Okay, I'd like to recoup my time for that for just a minute, whatever they did during the hearings. That brings up the next question, the agreements, the letters, the agreement, letters of agreement. That was simply made between the helicopter company and the attorney. And according to the new contract, it can be changed at any time. And so if we agree on a $10,000 or 10,000 foot level, they can come in the next day and make another agreement and change it according to this contract. There's the new contract is not, leaves a lot of questions. It says the operator will operate in a manner to avoid low altitude flight, but it doesn't give you a definition of what low altitude is. It says the operator will agree to flight procedures that are in the draft letter of agreement, which is Exhibit 5, that generally, big word, require operator between 500 and 600 feet. And you guys were out there, you saw 500 feet. If that thing crashes,
Thank you,
there's
Mr. Uyghur.
nowhere to go except in our houses.
Your time's up, Mr. Uyghur.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Is that my recoup time too?
That did include some recoup time, yes, sir. Mrs. Stacy Brady on Zoom.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Well, in the course of this meeting, I've had a flyover buzz me every 4 minutes. And so I brought my laptop outside. We'll see if they continue. The sun is setting and they get really busy. Again, my name is Stacy Brady, and I've been a resident of Destin for 25 years, where I've lived in the same house in Crystal Beach for the entire 25 years. I love my home. It's 2 blocks from the Gulf, and my back porch deck faces south. I also love the military jets and planes and their training exercises. I do not mind the private planes flying over the Destin airport. I can deal with the heavy traffic in Destin. What I do not like and has become a serious problem is the constant buzzing of the tourist helicopters throughout the day. They are beyond a nuisance. They are significantly decreasing our quality of life. These helicopters do not buzz us once an hour or even once every half hour. Yesterday, from 3:18 p.m. to 3:16 p.m., no less than 8 helicopters buzzed back and forth over the beach and in close proximity of our house. I hear and see that every one of them, I hear and see every one of them, and they are close. They fly low and then they fly over the land, not the water. They definitely are not flying 500 feet above the air. It's very unsafe. The constant buzzing makes it impossible to enjoy sitting on the deck. You can't even have a conversation outside due to the ongoing noise of the helicopters. Another day recently, the helicopters were buzzing every 30 seconds back and forth. I invite any of the council members or naysayers to come to my house to experience this terrible situation yourself. I do not want to deny anyone's right of making a living. However, the benefit of a few people compared to the detriment of thousands of people seems unfair and upside down. If you've ever seen that helicopter landing on that 98 pad and been on 98, it is terrifying. It goes so low. And they are definitely at 98 at 100 feet, maybe. These helicopter owners need to come up with a solution. I simply do not want to hear and see these disruptive helicopters for hours each day. It's stressful. Just because we live in a vacation destination does not mean we need to settle for a lower quality of life. As a side note, this has the potential to decrease our housing values. And regardless of what the legalese and the lawyers are saying, what about being a responsible and caring community member? Thank you very much, council members. I appreciate your time.
On Zoom, Mr. Jared O'Neill.
Mr. O'Neill has left the meeting, but he did leave a comment to be read. Timberview owners seem to be trying to be very accommodative, but at the end of the day, buyers of real estate bear the responsibility of due diligence of all of the potential drawbacks of buying a house, one of which is noise, whether it be a busy road or buying near an airport, police station, fire department, hospital, etc. This airport didn't just pop up. Those that bought around the airport should expect noise from the airport. Thank you. Jared O'Neill, Indian Bayou resident.
Mr. Thomas Ronchette.
Good evening. So I came here and I was going to kind of express my concern over the amount of helicopter traffic that we have kind of by our house. So we live in Crystal Beach, and I hear a lot of people here from Crystal Beach kind of expressing the same concerns that we have. And that is the number of flights that go by every single day, and at times where it is just constantly back and forth from west to east and east to west. And, I got to the point where my wife and I were just kind of sitting on the porch because our home does face south. And we're like, yeah, why don't we just kind of take a picture and just kind of clock every time the helicopter flew by. So we did that on June 18th. And it was in the evening, 4:44 through 6:30. So, call it an hour and 45 minutes. And like what I'm hearing from a lot of our neighbors, it was 38 flights that passed by and kind of equated out to every 2.8 minutes. So when I start thinking about that, and I spent a lot of time in Atlanta, lived there, and a lot of time on airplanes, and a lot of times flying out of ATL, and that's probably the busiest airport that we have in the world. Flights in 2020, there are over 7,000 takeoffs and landings. And that equated out to about every 45 seconds, there was a plane coming in or out. And I thought about kind of where I live in Destin, kind of, a great vacation place, but, it's a great fishing place. And I'm thinking, how could we be even approaching something like ATL with regard to this traffic that we're seeing with our tour operators? So, I'm disappointed to hear that there's no consideration for the helipad on 98 in this agreement. And clearly, Mr. Johnson said that that is not part of this conversation. But I would ask, and I'm hearing others doing the same, Mr. Johnson, this has got to be a heavy weight on you. Hearing everything that you're hearing from the community about how you can help us improve our quality of life. Because really, at the end of the day, it is a quality of life issue for us, and I know it's a safety issue for a lot of people as well, watching those helicopters take off and land on 98. So I hear you're looking to, do away with some of your short hops. That's great. I hear you're looking to maybe add some larger helicopters so you can have more people on that. That's great. What I don't know is you have 4 now. Will you have 6 next year and 8 the following year? I have no idea what that entails. But clearly, there's probably more that you can be doing. There's only so much we can be doing through regulations from state to federal, but you are the operator of this helicopter tour, and it really rests on your shoulders to really help this community get in a better place.
Mrs. Becky Pritchard.
Also, I don't know if that has to count against my 3 minutes or not. You can answer it later. I am curious, since this Timberview owns both locations now, what happens if another helicopter tour company wants to come to Destin? That's just out there. So I did write something down because if I just spoke from my heart, there might be some profanity that came out. So if y'all read the Nextdoor app, which I know a lot of y'all do, because I recognize your names, and you read the comments, you might come away wondering if all elected officials are self-serving, corrupt, and always siding with developers, and that citizens have no right to complain about any sort of issue of growth in Destin. If you live in a coastal tourist town, you should just accept what happens without question. And I don't believe either one of these are true, but it is hard to understand how things are approved or allowed to continue when so many people are against them. Somehow I am always on the side that has the 3-minute time limitation and no PowerPoint presentation. I don't understand why that works that way. You get invited to a meeting and you're only given 3 minutes. Appoint a spokesperson, don't repeat what others say, but your voice really matters. So in order to live here, we do learn to live without things and give other things up. We don't go to Walmart on Saturday. There's increased traffic during the tourist season. We don't go anywhere on the holiday weekends or you're out of your mind. And if you live on the airport, there are airplane noises. Yep, Friday afternoon they're coming in. Hey, as they're coming in, Sunday afternoon they're leaving. Bye, see y'all next time. That's the way it was. So when you're not doing all those things like Walmarting and going out to dinner, you stay home. But now home's not even enjoyable. You can get away from the tourists, you can get away from the traffic, you can get away from the heat, and you can even get away from the airplane noises because they're not constant. You can't get away from those helicopter noises. You hear them approaching, you hear them flying overhead, and you hear them leaving. And after a full day of hearing them every 10 minutes, which is a conservative estimate, you hear them even when they're not there. It's maddening. And I'm not saying that it makes me mad, although it fully does. It is driving me mad. And apparently there's a lot of people that feel that way. I would have laughed at myself if I ever heard myself say, my quality of life is suffering. Wah. But it's true. It is so infuriating. So I don't believe anybody comes to Destin in order to take a 20-minute helicopter ride. There were plenty of visitors here before the tour started. I don't believe they're a necessary attraction. And in fact, I believe quite a few of our guests won't be coming back because it is so obnoxious. The last time I went to Henderson Beach, I haven't been back since. And that's a shame. So I just would like to tell the commissioners and FAA and Alexa and whoever else is listening that it's okay to change your mind. It is okay to admit you made a wrong decision the first time you approved a lease. I would like to see the leases terminated, as I believe is their authority. Thank you.
Mr. Dan Gasparovich.
I'm a resident of Indian Lake, right down the street, and I feel sorry for you people that are getting the shaft by the helicopter pad in Crystal Beach. We got to stick together, because if they say we're going to do something for one, it's not good if they don't do it for everybody. It's BS. Social media reports Timberlake grosses an annual sales of $5 million. That's on their webpage. They're proud of it. What do we get out of it? All right. According to the reports from Okaloosa County, Timberview made $800,000 in 2020. This year, I bet you they beat it. 2020 was with COVID. So can you imagine how much they're making this year? Oh my gosh, they're probably, I don't know what they're doing. So of course, Timberlake wants a new contract so they can keep making more money. Yeah, American way, go, go, go. You little people, all right? I understand Timberlake wants to make money as much as they can, as fast as they can. For Timberlake, this means flying as low and as fast as possible to ferry paying customers from Destin Airport to the beach, back over to the new helipad, back, like that lady was saying, every 6 seconds or whatever. You know, unbelievable when you hear some of this. Unfortunately, this low and fast approach means the aircraft are flying over residential areas, more or less my house. So when you hear that demonstration when we went out, to me that was ridiculous. When you come over my house, it's twice as bad because they're making that turn to go to their approach. It's ridiculous. And if no one can hear that noise, they're stupid. You know, oh, don't worry about it. We're going to make more money next year, so you should be happy. What is the benefit of the citizens of Okaloosa County to have a helicopter tour operating from Destin Airport? Well, everybody's talking about that 5%. They are supposed to pay the county 5%. Everybody mentioned that. What they forgot to mention, however, that several county administrators have stated that the income from the operation does not cover the administrative costs. Who covers the cost then? We do. So we're getting double jeopardy. Tourist development, everybody, oh yeah, tourists are good for Destin. Timberlake would want you to think so with their helicopter tour. Guess how much, or according to the Okaloosa County Tourist Office, helicopter tours are not even in the what? First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, not even in the top 10. So there goes the tourist bullshit, baloney. So with the audience, with a show of hands, does anyone in the room thinks Okaloosa County needs a helicopter tour operating from Destin Airport? Come on, raise your hands, guys. You're the only one that wants it. What's that?
Thank you, Mr. Gapovich, we're moving on.
Let me
Thank you,
go a
sir.
little more, because the
No, sir, I
military,
can't.
they're
We got-
talking
I got
about
a
the
pile here. I
military
gotta-
and the traffic. How much
appreciate it.
really is there military and private traffic? I bet you there's like one every 2 hours compared to one every 6 minutes.
Thank you, sir. We want to make sure everybody has the opportunity. I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
That's 3 minutes we get, so that's our 3 minutes.
Mr. Larry Caesar?
Good evening. Larry Caesar, 14 Indian Bayou Drive here in Destin. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. And as I previously stated several times, I'm speaking on behalf of myself tonight, not the Homeowners Association. I want to thank the commissioners, first off, particularly Mel, for making sure we had this meeting tonight. I know there were those who wanted no public input into this process, and so I thank you for sticking to your guns. I only had a couple of comments or questions. I was commenting specifically on the documentation that was provided. I had a chance to look at. I don't think we can get all this done in the 3 minutes, and so if I did have questions that we can't get to in the 3 minutes, I would ask that you guys answer them before you adjourn tonight. It's my understanding, so the first one is, it's my understanding that Exhibit 5 to the operating agreement is the route depictions and the language on those depictions, and I straightened that out, and I've heard it again tonight, so I know that is correct. The problem is that the text refers to a letter of agreement, and I think it's a stretch to call that a letter of agreement. Exhibit 5 is not a letter of agreement. Exhibit 5 is two charts with some words on it without all the details. So I think you should revisit that text. And my second question is a question for Mr. Stubblefield, but now I guess it's Jim Slade. Is it Jim Slade from the tower? Can you hear me, Jim?
I can hear you. It's Slate, S-L-A-T-E.
Okay, thank you. Here's my question for you. Will the tower specify the specific route name upon providing takeoff, departure, and arrival clearance? For example, the aircraft is cleared for the Palms departure, or the aircraft is cleared for the Palms arrival, or whatever the case may be. If it's the Palms or the airport departure or the bay, whatever the case may be, are you going to clear them for that specific term? And the reason I ask is, if you don't, how do I know that the pilots are actually going to fly the routes that are in Exhibit 5? And so that's my question. The reason I'm trying to ask that is I'm trying to nail down what the phrase instructions from air traffic control mean in the context of day-to-day ops. And what I think is going to happen is, if you look at those routes, you've got a departure and arrival route with guys going in different directions at the same time. And I know what's going to happen. They're going to deviate to the north. And I'm going to speed it up because I'm running out of time. My last comment has to do with the second page of the handout I provided you. And it's a route that I suggest for departure from the Palms a little bit farther to the west than the one that's depicted. It's the red line on the chart. It does two things. It deconflicts with the arrival and departure, and it moves that a little bit farther to the southwest for the departure. It allows the arrivals to fly the Palms. And I think that would help out the noise problem, particularly in Indian Bayou. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. Well, let's give Mr. Slade a chance to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Is my mic still on?
Yes, Jim, you're good.
Okay, thank you. If the letter of agreement goes into effect, the use of the terms helps the controller understand what the pilot wants to do. and it cuts down on verbiage on the frequency. So if the pilot asked for something and the controller was able to approve it, then they would say proceed as requested or join the Palms route, for example. But I do need to clarify that the city, while the county may be putting those new routes into their agreement with the helicopter operator, we do not have the authority to sign up for those routes until they're reviewed by FAA.
So it sounds like the answer is no. You're not going to clear them to fly the Palms route as specified on the chart. Is that correct?
If the agreement ends up being reviewed by FAA and those end up being the routes, then we will be signatory to a document, and then we would use the term in the document. But until we are signatory to the agreement, then no.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure I understand the true implications of when that would occur. From the sounds of it, in the near term, it doesn't sound like anything's going to change. So if that's the case, then, Mel, I don't think this agreement's ready for prime time, if that's the case. Thanks.
Mrs. Diane Reedy?
There are no helicopters in it. I had a speech arranged, but a lot of the points have been covered. I'm just going to say quickly, my name is Diane Reedy. I've been a resident and a tax-paying citizen in Miramar Beach for 10 years. And my husband and I enjoy our beach and our garden, which is very restful and peaceful until recently. I can't even go out and work in my garden, which is therapeutic for me, both physically and mentally, because the noise and frequency is unbearable, as several of you have noted. It runs almost year-round. It runs over our beach chairs when we go to the beach. It is incessant. It will literally drive you bonkers. And all my peaceful things that I try to do to stay healthy and active are now not so fun and very stressful. They do fly over highly populated areas. We go to the beach all the time. I have a nice tan because I go to the beach, but I really try to hope it's a really heavy wave day so I don't hear that noise going back and forth. They literally turn around at my beach, which we're 0.3 of a mile from the beach. The whap, whap, whap of that turn is so loud that I just cannot avoid it, and it's very, very annoying. The quality of life is horrible in that regard. I speak for me as a citizen. I also speak as a tax-paying citizen, and I also speak for all the tourists and friends and neighbors who tell me and who have said for some reason their voices are not heard. Apparently, people who live here have no power. Now, if I want to start up a band in my backyard and I want to practice outside, I will be cited for noise ordinance, and I will be told to stop doing that. That's not allowed. How can I start a helicopter company in the middle of a busy highway over a very, very busy place and a vacation place and not have something regulated? Where is it? A barking dog has regulations. Can we not create a regulation that monitors the noise, the frequency, and the just rudeness of it? It's just rudeness. It's invasive. I'm going to cover something that hasn't been covered. We already talked about noise and frequency, and they're unbearable. Safety issues. These pilots, I don't know what 500 feet is. Based on what I just saw, I believe they are flying over our beach chairs, highly populated, beach swimmers. Every time they make that turn, they don't turn out, they turn back in and go all the way right down the line of beach, because I guess that's what people want to hear and see. I find that very offensive. I mean, seriously, if there was an accident, it would be a horrible abomination. People can't okay, I want to get to a big important point. I'm concerned about our veterans. We love our military. I love our jets. I love the Ospreys. They don't bother me. They come and they do a job. They're doing a function. They're protecting us. They can fly all they want any time of day. I have no problems with that. We have a lot of military here. We have military that have retired. We have military that have been in Nam. We have military all the way up to today. They have PSTD. They have terrible PTSD. I'm sorry, I made this mistake. These helicopters have got to trigger that, and a lot of these people who have been in combat with helicopter noises, whap, 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 I tell you, I've got it, and I don't even have any word service in my history.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Your time is up. Thank you very much.
Oh, I haven't even got to the part why you really think people come to the beach to do helicopters? Do you know what's happening? People are staying away. Tourists say, I will never come back. My balcony, I'm seeing eye-to-eye helicopters all day long. There's some money you've lost. There's money. You want to talk about 5%? Try all those people that are not putting bed tax in this community.
Kellen Williams. Kellen Williams.
Is red good? Great. Thank you. My name's Kellen Williams. I'm a resident of Crystal Beach, 93 Mark Street's on the west side. We've been there about 2 years, been in the local area since 2003. A lot of stuff has been said today. I'm not going to rehash quality of life, frequency, and the such, but on this proposed route, something I sent to the councilman, excuse me, as you have a north-south drag over Hutchinson Street from Lulu's down to what is now the gateway of Crystal Beach, city and county have put upwards of $10 million into that project, which is kind of real money that we have going into that. As a tourist draw, as a get Destin back to, we can actually see the beach as we walk or drive down the streets. That's kind of my only thing here that no one else has talked about today. Is there a chance that we can move that north-south route? If we do adopt this circular route around Destin, which would potentially lessen the frequency of flights. You would not have a east-west turning back and forth every time. If we had a large circle going across, if we move that route to the east, you limit the flights, the turning of the helicopters over what seems to be the county and the city's kind of leading tourist enterprise here with the amount of money and advertising that we've sunk into that over the last year. I think that's the only thing I have on. Probably have like 2 minutes left, but everything else, the quality of life, the frequency of the helipad, I'm less than 1,000 feet from the helipad. But if we could, Mr. John. Oh, terrific. If we could move that route, that north-south, and you're all those who can kind of going contradictory to where the float planes are flying. We talk safety and we talk noise and what we're trying to do with tourism and building the beaches back to what Destin was in years previous. That's kind of my pitch to the city and the county commissioners before we move forward with this agreement. Thank you.
Kevin Smith. Is there Kevin Smith?
Yes, sir. Come.
Sorry.
Good evening, Kevin Schmidt. Thank you for hosting this meeting and getting it here, Mr. Ponder. I will say there was a gentleman that spoke earlier that thanked a lot of municipalities and government agencies and different groups for working on all this, but to be honest, this is the first time that anybody, City of Destin, officials, government, anybody has been asked for anything, so that was not necessarily true. At the first meeting, the Board of County Commissioners, Mr. Stage, staff members, special counsel, they all recommended terminating this agreement. It was very clear, their evidence, their anger, the history of violations, it was terminated. It was pretty simple, it was what I heard and what the majority of people in that room that day in Shalimar heard and said. Unfortunately, the commissioners have the right to do what they would choose to do. They're supposed to act for the constituents, but in my opinion, I don't think they did that day. Some, not all, but unfortunately they didn't. Quality of life for the citizens of Destin is important to all of us in this room. This airport is in our city. It's right here down the street. Residents are impacted by it on a constantly, daily, minute-by-minute basis. Visitors, obviously. The city is that my timer? Or? Oh, okay. Gotcha. We're impacted by it on a constant basis all the time, every day. It's shocking how one business, one person, can have such a huge impact on the amount of people, both residents, visitors, family, friends. One person and one business can have such a huge impact. It's sad, it's shocking. The map, the holding area, I will, what I've also heard is that the FAA, like, this is a proposed map that you're going to ask them to do, but the tower and the FAA might not even do these patterns until the FAA reviews it, which, from what it sounds like, the FAA is not in a rush to do much of anything with this airport. So this is a great idea, but the control tower, what I think I heard you say, could tell you to do the path that you have to do for safety-wise. So this isn't even relevant anymore, it seems like, unfortunately. The holding area, I've sent some videos recently, and I know this is in the past, but even moving forward, I think I heard the owner say tonight that they have to go north because of the wind. When they're coming back to land, they do a U-turn around Main Street, and then they head south to land. That is directly over homes, a lot of homes, as you're doing that holding area pattern. I guess I'll finish up, I'm sorry. So one change I would possibly recommend, hopefully commissioners think about it, is instead of going northwest from that holding pattern, how about just go straight north to the bay and then out of all those homes along Indian Trail that you are directly, as I sit in my backyard and look straight up and I can see the eyes of your pilots right there. That would be something to be considered. Or why not head west to Okaloosa Island? I mean, hit Crab Island. Crab Island's a worldwide destination. Head west to Okaloosa Island. You're not going to bother anybody. And I've heard about regulations about national parks, but the banner planes fly down to Okaloosa Island, so I think you'd solve everybody's problems because there's nobody there until you get to the boardwalk. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Randy Brown.
There we go. We live north, so we're not down on the beach where some of you are, but we live up north where they land and take off, and we get to watch them come in. And my wife and I were out in the backyard last night, and every 30 to 45 seconds, a helicopter was coming over and landing, or another one was taking off and heading somewhere. And I look at this map and I go, well, we're going to have the beach experience on the north side of Destin now, because we're going to run up and down the beach, and then when we have to, we'll go up north along the bay, and we'll expose everybody on the bay to the same noise contours and noise pollution that the beach is experiencing. So we're going to double the problem. We're not going to solve it. Just a couple of things. We've heard a lot about this as Class D airspace. I'm retired Air Force, 40 years. I flew air rescue with air rescue and was in the Air Force. I've flown in a lot of helicopters. I've had to deal with auto-rotated helicopters going out and working, doing mishap investigations. I was a trained mishap investigator in the Air Force. So I kind of understand some of this, not at the detail that a pilot would or some other folks would, but I would say that this airspace is not compatible with this kind of service. We have way too much military traffic coming and going all the time. We have way too much private aviation coming and going all the time, and this is a commercial service. And when I look in TripAdvisor, the two helicopter services, the two places on the pad and over at the airport are rated around 65 and 74. out of all of the attractions in Destin. So kind of getting to the point some of you had made, this isn't the top 10 attraction in Destin. In fact, if you look at TripAdvisor, the last several comments have been folks from out of state commenting about the noise and how it ruined their vacation time here. So I think while we are maybe putting money in a pocket over here, we're taking money out of the pocket over there. And I think we're going to lose money out of this pocket that goes into a lot of other pockets here because it generates a lot of other businesses, stimulates a lot of other businesses here in the area. Just a couple of thoughts as I wrap this up. From a safety perspective, I was doing some reading through the Code of Federal Regulations. You've heard a lot about that tonight. There is some discussions in there about doing safety risk assessments. That when we do and we look at where we're going to fly and how we're going to fly, there should be some risk assessment of what that does to the public and what that does to those that are flying. You know, whether they be crew members or whether they be paying customers in there. So I'd be very interested as we move forward, especially in talking to the FAA about what sort of risk assessments have been done. This is kind of a generous, there's a lot of a range here on how fast you fall in a helicopter when you lose power and have to auto-rotate. But being generous, it's 33 feet per second. If you're 300 feet above ground, that's 9 seconds before you impact. So just to kind of cage some of these things, why is safety an issue? Because even at 500 feet, you got to get down in a hurry. And if you look at this community, as has been mentioned, there's a lot of people on the beach. There's a lot of people in our neighborhoods. It's very hard to find an open space to put a helicopter down.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Brown.
out of time. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And,
Ms. Teresa Aber. Aber.
Teresa Aber. I'm here as a resident. I live at the end of Main Street. The helicopters literally fly right over my pool. Got to a point where my husband said, you can't sit out there in your bathing suit because I'm pretty sure they're telling the next pilot you're out there. So when you say you can see them, I can see them. I knew what we were buying 10 years ago. I knew we were at the airport. I realized that, you know, it's going to be traversed. My problem is it went from about one every 30 minutes to about one every 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And I realized that this is Grant. I realized that this is a county Timberlake decision agreement. But as a resident of Destin, I feel saddened that we as the residents have absolutely no way of begging them to limit the flights. I realize you've got to make money, but if we have to have this because there's grant money and this is involved and all the other things that everyone else has discussed, if you could just maybe, if you're going to get the bigger helicopters, thin out the amount of times an hour you fly. It would probably help the tourists that hear all the noise and get frustrated that it's a very noisy town now. And I'm sure that you could still manage to get the amount of people that want to get airborne, maybe charge a little bit more and then they'd feel the value of it. But to fly as often as you do, every single hour of every single day of almost the entire since May. I don't even know if there's a time that you slow down anymore. I'm not really sure. But as a resident and as your city councilwoman, my heart bleeds for all of you because I am in the same boat and we don't have anything we can do about it except thank you for coming and listening. Thank you for hearing what we are asking and maybe, you know, adjust your flying amount an hour. Other than that, you know, I realize that it is a business. I just wish you would be a good neighbor and maybe stop flying as much so that it wouldn't be as noisy as consistently. Thank you.
Mr. Jim Bagby. asked, and we'd like to get answers, but we want to get through this and give everyone a chance to comment. So there are a number of questions about the sort of the maximum number of helicopters being allowed to fly, to park, or excuse me, the number of trips per day. There's no limits on that. Again, that's not anything that we can impose, and the operator has not agreed to any kind of operational limits on the number or frequency of operations. The maximum number of helicopters being allowed to park at the same time, I don't think the agreement or their agreement with Lynx currently specifies that. I believe it's 3 or 4 typically out there.
The last meeting, there were 11.
Those are the number of aircraft that were on the letter of authorization, not necessarily the number of aircraft that are either in operation here or parked at the airport. I'm going through the questions that I have a list here, but I'm not sure which questions Mike had asked about. The pilot flight training is not currently in the new agreement as a permitted use, so there would be no pilot training currently. It's limited to the tour operating, the aerial photography, and surveying operations, I believe, are the things. It's specified in the agreement, but flight training is not one of them. Operations from the helipad, if they fly from the airport to the helipad and then pick up passengers, that wouldn't be considered a revenue operation at the airport. The county wouldn't take a fee on that. And again, the operation agreement at Timberview does not extend operations to the helipad. You asked a question about whether the Timberview would have to apply for approval pursuant to Section 15 of the minimum standards. I mean, the answer is yes, that's what we're doing here. They had an agreement, it was terminated. We're renegotiating a new agreement that's effectively asking the airport director for a new agreement. So that's how we're complying with that. And another thing I want to be clear about is in the recommendations that we made to the county board back in June, we did recommend termination, which the county board did with some modification, but we also recommended negotiating a new agreement. And the main modification that the commission gave us was to extend the timeline within which to do that. We tried to make it clear there were lots of issues with Timberview's operations, but we need to be addressed partly by the county with respect to the operating agreement, but mostly by the FAA with respect to safety and with respect to the flight paths. And that's all being done in separate ways according to who has jurisdiction. And I think those are the questions, Mike.
One question was Sunset and sound familiar with Sunset EENT or not?
There's a definition in the FARs of what is VFR day flying. And that's what we're all following, what is provided for in the regulations for pilots. As pilots, we have daytime flying, it has specific hours defined. The agreement refers to that way, and you can find that. If you can't, you're more than welcome to email me or call me, and I'll send you the link to it.
Okay.
The FAA has a specific defined definition for what is end of daylight.
Okay.
It's defined in the aims and it's
the AIM.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, I can't, I'm not gonna, I don't have it memorized. It's in that book that the gentleman showed you earlier. It's in the Part 91 definitions.
I understand it's got almost an astronomical definition, but it is sometime 15, 20 odd minutes after what we would call sunset.
Well, because sunset changes, and we're trying to follow the FAA rules though, because you might be flying back at sunset. All right, I'm answering you.
Yeah. No, okay. I got it. I understand sunset. I understand EENT. I understand all those things, but I don't understand that. But I'll learn that. So, Jim Bagby, most of you know I've spent the last couple of months walking the city, walking the streets of the city. In fact, I've talked with some of you when you got up and talked. And I will tell you, this is the first time I've ever campaigned in this city, and the number one issue was not code enforcement or a lack of code enforcement. Seriously, the number one issue was the helicopters. In every part of the city, even over on Calhoun. I walked all of Calhoun and all that. It was the number one issue. And it's just, the city has got to do something, and I understand that. I feel for the people by the airport, I really do. but I really feel for my neighbors, okay, in Crystal Beach. And I live in Destiny East also. And the problem is you get the helicopters that are taking off from the airport. We get the helicopters that are taking off from the airport and from the helipad. And so, and I know you can't negotiate the helipad, but we're not going to stop with the FAA. I cannot believe that the setbacks for that helipad right by a 6-lane highway with all the traffic count are allowed to be there. I don't see all the little orange balls. Maybe I'm missing them, but I would think with all those power lines out there, it'd be nothing but orange balls down those power lines if there's helicopter operations within 1,000 feet of there, and there are. So I don't know, I do know that the council, Councilman Schmidt's here, Councilwoman Aber is here. I think there were a couple others. Of course, our commissioner, Mel Ponder is here. And I promise you tonight, we will do a resolution. I'm going to ask the city to do a resolution to our senators, our governor, and our representative, and some of us know some of them real well, okay, to get the FAA in here. We will give you all the help we can do to get them here because they've got to answer these questions. I understand Timberview's not going to answer these questions. I understand the county's not going to answer the questions, particularly with the helipad. I don't really know the 1,000-foot thing. I kind of understand. I don't want helicopters flying into planes, flying into the airport. I kind of get that. It seems like there should be a way to deconflict that. Gary probably could tell me, but I don't know. But we got to fix what's going on out there at that helipad. And the only way to do that is through the FAA. And if once we get the FAA here, then let's just crack open this nut and let's solve it. And I understand that's what we have to do, and I appreciate everything y'all have done. Thank you.
Martin Lewis on Zoom.
Mr. Lewis has requested I read something out for him. He said, "My questions have been brought up by other speakers except for one. Please read out and ask the following. What provisions are in the proposed operating agreement regarding minimum operating distance away from shoreline? If none, what provisions can be included?" And Jim Bosserman and Tracy say thank you, Councilman Bagby.
With respect to the altitudes and the distance from the shoreline, it states, per the FAA, the helicopter operator or the flight must be in a safe auto-rotation distance from the shore. So when you put him at his altitude, and you are flying currently at 300 feet, roughly, correct? 500 feet. So that's the new operating altitude. Along the beach, he has to be within safe auto-rotate distance to land. So that puts him roughly just inside the second sandbar along the beach, to answer that question. That's definitely been communicated to the FAA.
Mr. Lewis says, how is that enforced? And Jim Bosserman and Tracy say, our understanding is that the helicopters must fly near the shore for two reasons. They have to be able to glide to a landing, and they don't have life preservers on board.
All of our passengers are equipped with life jackets and are required to wear them to be inside the aircraft. Some aircraft are also equipped with floats.
Okay, Mrs. Stacy Brady on Zoom.
Mrs. Brady, can you hear us? Please unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I made my comments earlier, and I would just like to, reiterate that these aircraft, these helicopters are not flying above 500 feet, and they are not flying off the sandbar. They are flying over the beach, and they are flying many, 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 many times within 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes. That are all my comments. Thank you.
That's all the speaker cards I have. Before we adjourn, and like Eric said, we'll stay if anybody else has any questions to speak with us. But in closing, I do want to make a couple of comments and kind of reiterate what I said earlier with the agency having jurisdiction. The county, airport staff, and council, we've done our best as far as this operating agreement is concerned with controls on the ground. We have zero jurisdiction on most everything that has been brought up tonight, on altitudes, flights, frequencies, types. We have zero jurisdiction. And I mentioned the county commissioners do not have any jurisdiction or authority, nor does the city of Destin. The folks that do are the FAA. And yes, like Councilman Bagby stated, write your senators. We definitely did that already. We have Senator Scott's ear. His staff has responded to us. We have asked Senator Scott to please get the FAA involved at the highest levels from the southern region to come in here and establish or do just what the gentleman stated about a safety risk management analysis on the entire situation. And whatever comes out of that, we hope they determine what the helicopter routes are and the altitudes are and where they're located. So that's our hope, but as far as the operating agreement goes, we cannot deny access, right? This agreement has to go forward to the county commissioners for a recommendation of approval. But I do want the public to understand, most everything that you have brought up is outside of our jurisdiction, unfortunately. Trust me, unfortunately, there was a reason why it was taken to the county commissioners recommending termination, so we could at least do whatever we possibly can to show the public we are doing all we can. One good thing that came of this is it brought it to issue. We got the attention of the southern region, which we've been trying to do for years. This is nothing new, right? We got the attention of Senator Scott. So we're hopeful, and the communications we've received from the FAA Southern Region's office, we believe they are working on it. So that said, we did our best, and look, Mr. Johnson's here, his counsel's here, the air traffic control tower manager, Mr. Slate's here on Zoom. But here's our opportunity, right? The commissioners demanded public involvement and input. Right? We initially set that up. It got canceled somehow for some reason. And then it was brought back up and the commissioners demanded it, or else I wasn't going to take the agreement forward until we had this meeting. We had this meeting. Mr. Johnson's here. There were a couple of comments, eloquent comments that I picked out. Mr. Thomas Rochette and Mr. Bob Shelton. Those were outstanding comments that you brought forward. So let's ask Mr. Johnson, what can you do? You agreed to the 500 to the 600 foot altitude. Can you go higher? And I understand getting conflicting with oncoming traffic or altitudes with fixed wing. But that's the reason why there's a control tower there. They can deconflict the traffic. They can hold you until it's clear for you to go. So I'm asking, will you work with us even more, understanding what you're hearing? Because everything you're hearing is what my office has been hearing for years. For years. The county commissioners have been hearing it for years. Let's be a good neighbor. We've We got an agreement, we're ready to go. All we need to do is get this dialed in. So I ask you, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Schofield, help us help you, honestly. That's what it comes down to.
We're happy to help, and we're trying to help.
If I could, this meeting's adjourned, right? So I don't want to keep anybody, but, you know, if you want to hang out and ask questions, thank you very much for coming. Appreciate your involvement and public input.